the New Year's party at my son's house, he asked me a question I'll never forget. My father-in-law, Roland, built a 6,000 square foot mansion, Colin announced to the dinner table. He drives a Mercedes. He owns rental properties. Then he turned to me with pity in his eyes. Dad, what have you actually built? The room went silent. I looked at the son I'd raised alone for 21 years. The son I'd given $80,000 to. The son standing in a house I'd paid for while praising a man whose business was collapsing. I smiled calmly. You really want to know? I'm grateful you're here. Do me a favor, comment below with your city and what time it is right now. I want to see how many of us are out here scattered across the world sharing these stories. As another new year approached, I found myself thinking about the one that came before the night that changed everything between my son and me. I pulled into my son's driveway that New Year's Eve and parked behind a silver Mercedes S-Class. The contrast wasn't lost on me, his father-in-law's leased luxury sedan, gleaming under the porch light, my 15-year-old Honda Civic, looking small and tired beside it. Colin met me at the door with a hug that felt more obligatory than warm. Dad, you made it, he said, already glancing past me toward the living room where voices and laughter spilled out. Wouldn't miss it, I said. Whitney appeared, smiling brightly. Marshall, come in. Let me take your coat. I handed it over and stepped inside. The house was beautiful, 3 bedrooms, hardwood floors, crown molding. My son had done well, or so it appeared. The living room was full of people I didn't know. 15, maybe 20 guests, all dressed in cocktails and blazers. I recognized a few faces from the wedding, 2 years ago, but no one approached me. I found a spot near the wall and accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray. Across the room, Roland Colin's father-in-law held court near the fireplace, gesturing expansively as he told some story about a deal in Miami. Colin stood beside him, listening with the kind of attention I hadn't seen directed at me in years. Marshall Wright, a man in his 50s, extended his hand. Gerald, a neighbor. What do you do? I'm retired, I said. I was a structural engineer. Ah, Gerald said, nodding politely. Then someone called his name and he excused himself. I watched my son laugh at something Roland said, watched Whitney refresh Roland's drink without being asked, watched the room orbit around a man who wasn't even family yet, know who was family now, but somehow more family than I was. At 9 o'clock, Colin called everyone into the center of the room. The crowd shuffled in, glasses in hand. I just want to say thank you, Colin began, his voice clear and earnest, to everyone here. This year has been incredible. Whitney and I are so grateful for all of you. He raised his glass. But especially I want to toast to Roland, my father-in-law, the most successful man I know. Thank you for everything you've taught me about building something that lasts. The room erupted in agreement. Glasses clinked. Roland smiled, gracious and modest in a way that felt rehearsed. No one looked at me. I stood there, glass in hand, invisible. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and realized he had no idea who his father actually was. But he was about to find out. My wife Ellen died when Colin was 12. Cancer. I won't dwell on it. What matters is this: from the day we buried his mother until the night he stood in his own house and asked me what I had ever built, I raised my son alone. For 21 years, I was the only parent he had. I worked as a senior structural engineer. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. I did my 40 hours and, when needed, stayed late. I gave up dating and hobbies. I gave up a life that wasn't centered on making sure my son had what he needed. I helped with college costs. He took loans for the rest. I wanted him to learn independence and understand that success meant effort, not entitlement. While I was doing all of that, I was building something else. I worked for 35 years and lived below my means. I drove the same car for over a decade, stayed in a modest house, and never felt the need to impress anyone. I saved aggressively and invested quietly retirement accounts, index funds, bonds. Over time, I bought 2 rental properties, paid for them in cash, and watched them generate income while I slept. I retired at 62 because I could afford to. Passive income arrived every month without effort. No one knew. I didn't advertise it. Wealth isn't about showing people what you have. It's about having it when you need it. Colin was a good kid. We were close through high school. He drifted in college, but he still respected me. After graduation, he found a marketing job and started building his own life. He dated and became independent. He was proud of his progress, and I was proud of him. Then 3 years ago, he met Whitney. Her family had money, the kind that shows. A big house, expensive cars. Her father, Roland, was a real estate developer with an office full of plaques and a personality that filled every room, and my practical son started comparing. Whitney's dad has a boat. Roland drives a new BMW every year. They just got back from Europe. When Colin got engaged, he wanted to buy a house. One night he sat at my kitchen table, more stressed than I'd seen him since his mother died. "Dad, I need help. I'm short on the down payment." "How much do you need?" I asked. "More than I should." I helped him. I transferred the money the next day. He cried and hugged me hard. "Thank you, Dad. I'll never forget this." I told him it's what fathers do. I didn't say that I gave him what he needed, not everything I had. After the wedding, things changed. Calls grew shorter. Visits became rare. When he came by, every conversation circled back to Roland, his office, his vacation home, his advice. The last 6 months were the worst. I barely heard from Colin unless it was a holiday. Tonight was the first invitation to his house in half a year, and only because Whitney insisted. Somewhere between gratitude and tonight, my son forgot his roots, admired illusions while I knew the truth. Roland didn't just tell stories, he performed them. Back in the living room, guests clustered around him as if he were on stage. He was mid-sentence when I tuned back in, gesturing with that expensive watch. I'd bet it was leased like most things he owned. "Closed a $2 million deal last month," he announced. Developer tried to back out. I had to get creative. Colin stood beside him, eyes bright. "That's incredible. How do you even handle deals that big?" Roland smiled like a professor addressing a gifted student. "Vision, son. Not everyone's built for it." The group murmured approval. Colin nodded, soaking it in. "Take that Riverside property," Roland continued. "Everyone said I was crazy. Now it's worth triple." I knew that property. I'd seen the records while researching rentals. It wasn't worth triple anything. One bad tenant could collapse it. Someone turned to me. "What about you, Marshall? Any big projects in retirement?" "I keep busy," I said. "Property management." Roland smiled. "That's nice. Everyone needs hobbies." Hobbies. Like I was assembling model trains. Colin laughed with them, said nothing. I sipped my soda and stayed quiet. The talk shifted to cars. "Just got the new Mercedes S-Class," Roland said. "Lease deals are fantastic." Lease. There it was. "Those are about 100 grand, someone said. Roughly, but image matters. Clients expect success." Colin nodded. "First impressions are everything." His eyes flicked to the driveway, to my 15-year-old Honda beside Roland's Mercedes. He looked away fast, but I saw it. My car was paid off. Roland's was $80,000 of shrinking value. I excused myself to the kitchen. Needed a refill, needed space. Colin followed, grabbing ice. "How's work?" I asked. "That campaign you mentioned?" "Oh, fine." He didn't meet my eyes. "Did you meet Roland's partner? Interesting guy?" I didn't. Before I could respond, Whitney appeared. "Colin, your dad, helped himself to drinks," she said, politely sharp. "Oh, thanks, Dad." Still no eye contact. "Colin, I tried. Maybe we grab lunch next week. Just us." "Yeah, maybe. I'll check." He shut the freezer. "Roland wants me to tour a property." From the living room. "Colin, you've got to hear this." "Coming," and he was gone. I stood alone, holding a paper plate I wouldn't touch. A minute later, Pamela came in, Roland's wife. Her smile faded when she thought no one saw. "You all right, Pamela?" She startled, then sighed. "Busy. Always busy with Roland's ventures." The words sounded tired. "Pamela," Roland called. Her smile snapped back. "Coming, dear." She left, but I'd seen the truth. She knew exactly who her husband was. "Dinner's ready," Roland announced. Colin appeared. Dining room. Roland brought champagne, the good stuff. I glanced at the bottle. $200. Roland grinned. Only the best for family. Everyone moved. I followed at the back. Colin guided Roland to the head of the table, in his own house. I sat at the far end. That's when I knew the night wouldn't end quietly. 20 minutes later, we were seated around the table plates, full and champagne poured. Roland wasn't just sitting at the head of the table, he was commanding it, as if the dining room were another boardroom. "This lamb," Gerald said, cutting into his plate. "Pamela, you've outdone yourself." Pamela smiled, but Whitney answered for her. "Mom got the recipe from a chef in Napa. She's been perfecting it for months." Roland lifted his glass, waiting for the attention to settle. "You know what I'm most proud of," he said. "Not the deals, not the portfolio. It's building something to pass down. Legacy. That's what matters." Colin nodded eagerly. "That's what everyone wants, right? To leave something behind for the people who come after." "Exactly," Roland said. "That's what separates people who build wealth from people who just work." My jaw tightened. I cut my lamb slowly, carefully. Across the table, Whitney glanced at me, then looked away as if she'd stepped into something uncomfortable. The conversation drifted to New Year's resolutions. Someone mentioned the gym. Someone joked about drinking less wine. "What about you?" Marshall Pamela asked politely. "Any plans for the new year?" "Nothing ambitious," I said. "Maybe a road trip. The car's still good for a few more years." Gerald laughed. "How old is that Honda now?" 2008, I said. "Runs fine. Paid off." There was a brief pause. Roland smiled thin and measured. "Paid off," he repeated. "Well, that's practical." Colin shifted in his chair. I saw the flash of embarrassment cross his face, and it stung more than Roland's comment. I said nothing and took a sip of water. The conversation turned to investments. Roland leaned back, launching into a confident lecture about leverage. "The key," he said, "is using other people's money. You finance at 3% rent at 5. That's how wealth is built." Colin leaned forward. "I've been thinking about getting into that." "You should," Roland said smoothly. "I can introduce you to the right people." I set my fork down. Leverage works until it doesn't. The table went quiet. "What do you mean?" Colin asked. "I mean debt is risk," I said evenly. "When markets turn or tenants stop paying you, don't just lose property. You lose everything tied to it." Roland's jaw tightened. "With respect, that's a risk-averse mindset. Fortune favors the bold." "Fortune also destroys the reckless," I replied. Whitney stared at her plate. Gerald suddenly focused on his wine. Colin tried to mediate. "You have to take calculated risks to grow." "Calculated," I said, nodding. The tension lingered like smoke. Roland cleared his throat and changed the subject. By 9:45, my patience was wearing thin. Roland spent minutes praising his own vision, explaining how most people couldn't see past the present. Colin learned that from me, he said, clapping my son on the shoulder, "You don't get ahead by playing it safe." Colin smiled, but it looked hollow. "I'm lucky to have the support I do." "Your father-in-law is a good man," Pamela added. No one mentioned me. No one acknowledged the 21 years I'd spent raising my son alone. I looked down at my plate, calm on the outside, something quietly breaking within. Roland kept saying legacy. He had no idea what it truly cost to build one. I glanced at the clock. Dessert was coming, and with it the moment I'd been waiting for. Dessert plates were being passed around when it happened. Someone admired the house as Whitney set down a layered tiramisu. "This looks incredible," they said, "and the place is beautiful. You two must love it." "We do," Whitney replied warmly. "It finally feels like home." Roland leaned back in his chair. "Nice place," he said casually. "A good starter home?" The words lingered. Starter home. Colin nodded quickly. "Yeah. Hopefully someday we can upgrade to something like yours, Roland." Roland smiled pleased, but pretending modesty. "Pamela and I bought ours 20 years ago. Different market." Maxine leaned in. "It's a mansion, right? How big?" Roland didn't hide his pride. 6,000 square feet, 5 bedrooms, pool, wine cellar, theater. Soft murmurs traveled around the table. Colin glanced at me, then at the guests. "Must be nice," he said lightly. "Having a father who built that kind of success, right, Dad?" I looked up. "What?" Colin waved his hand. "I mean, Roland built a mansion, and you just—" He didn't finish. The room shifted. "Colin," I said quietly, but the wine had given him courage. "No, really." Whitney touched his arm, not to stop him. Colin addressed the table. "Think about it. My father-in-law built a 6,000 square foot mansion." Then he turned to me. "So what have you ever built, Dad?" Silence fell. Forks paused. A wine glass froze midair. Roland looked startled. Pamela closed her eyes. I stayed still, watching my son. "It's a fair question," Colin added, suddenly defensive. I set my fork down slowly and wiped my mouth, every movement deliberate. The silence stretched. I studied his face. His confidence was fading. Gerald shifted in his seat. "Maybe we should—" "It's all right," I said gently. My son asked a fair question. The clock ticked loudly. "Dad, I didn't mean," Colin began. I smiled calmly. "You want to know what I built?" He hesitated. Yes. "All right," I said. I let the pause grow uncomfortable. "I built 3 things," I said. "I'll start with the first." The table leaned in. "I built the down payment for this house." Confusion rippled. Colin frowned. "That's not—" 3 years ago," I continued. "You sat at my kitchen table. You were stressed. You said you were short. You needed $80,000. Gasps followed. "You said it was an early inheritance," Colin muttered, "that you wanted to help." "I wired it the next day," I said. $80,000. It's in the records." Whitney turned sharply. "You told me you saved that?" "I saved some," Colin stammered. 12,000. "You had 12, I said evenly. "I gave you the other 68. The number settled heavily. "That was everything you had," Colin whispered. "I never said that." He stared. "What?" You assumed it was everything I'd saved. Silence. It wasn't. His voice shook. Then how much? That 80,000, I said, calmly meeting his eyes, was about 4% of my portfolio. The room reacted instantly. A sharp inhale. A gasp. 4%, someone whispered. Colin's face collapsed as the math landed. Roland went still. Whitney stared at him. Pamela lowered her gaze. I remained calm as the truth settled the room, waiting for what I would reveal next. The room held its breath, waiting for me to continue. So I did. You want to know what 4% looks like, Colin? He couldn't speak. I have $1.8 million invested, I said. Index funds. Bonds. Retirement accounts I built over 35 years. The table froze. Someone whispered 1.8 million. I also own 2 rental properties, I continued. Both paid off. They generate $3,200 in passive income every month. Colin shook his head, voice cracking. That's not possible. You drive a 15-year-old car. I drive a paid-off car, I replied calmly. It has 180,000 miles and runs perfectly. You live in that small house. I live in a paid-off house. 3 bedrooms. No mortgage for 12 years. I let the silence do its work. I retired at 62 with about $8,000 coming in every month without working, I said. That's the difference between looking rich and being rich, Colin. Roland shifted in his chair. I built that portfolio 1 paycheck at a time, I went on. Over 35 years, while raising you alone after your mother died. Colin's voice trembled. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted you to build your own self-respect, I said. To believe you earned your success. I paused. I didn't want you living off your father's achievements. Another pause. But instead, I said quietly, you chose to live off someone else's image. Colin's face collapsed. He stared at his plate. I turned to Roland, and Roland knew all of this. Roland went pale. Whitney snapped her head up. What? In real estate, I said you check title records. It's standard. Roland stammered. That's private? It's public record, I said. My name, my bank, the wire transfer, $80,000. Pamela turned slowly to her husband. You knew. The settlement statement goes to all parties, I said. Roland's name was on it as Whitney's father. Roland tried to explain. I may have seen something, but... You knew I covered 30% of the down payment, I said. Whitney looked at him stunned. Dad. And you said nothing, I continued, while my son praised you, while he believed I had nothing. Roland grew defensive. I was protecting Colin's pride, protecting him from what I asked, knowing his father helped him. He faltered. Or was it easier to stay silent because it made you look better? Silence answered. You let him believe I gave him everything I had, I said. So you could be the only successful father at this table. Roland tried again. I didn't mean. You stayed quiet when he compared me to you, I said. When he asked what I built, you knew the answer. Colin turned to him, hurt clear in his voice. You knew this whole time. Roland couldn't look at him. Whitney stared at her father differently now. Pamela spoke softly. Roland, tell the truth. He swallowed. I saw the records, yes. I stood. My chair scraped against the floor. I came tonight because family matters, I said. Because Colin is my son and I love him. I looked around the table. But I won't sit where my own son asks what I built while standing in a house I paid for. Colin jumped up. Dad, wait. I'm sorry, I didn't know. You didn't know because you never asked, I said. You were too busy asking Roland about his deals. Please don't go, he begged. I love you, I said, but I don't recognize you anymore, and I won't finance disrespect. I turned for my coat. When you're ready to understand your father instead of comparing him to someone else, I said, call me. I left the room in silence, put on my coat, and walked into the cold January night. I made it 3 blocks before my hands started shaking. I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles had gone white. I could feel the tremor starting in my fingers, spreading up my forearms. The adrenaline was draining out of me all at once. My vision blurred slightly. I pulled into an empty parking lot, a grocery store closed for the holiday. I sat there with the engine running the heater, blasting warm air that did nothing to stop the shaking. My hands trembled on the wheel. I took a deep breath. I'd been holding that in for 3 years, maybe longer. I sat there for 5 minutes until the trembling eased. I checked the rearview mirror. My eyes looked exhausted. 65 years old, and I just blew up my relationship with my only child. I took one more deep breath, put the car in drive, kept going. My phone started buzzing in the cup holder. I glanced down. Colin calling. It buzzed again, and again. At a red light, I checked 5 missed calls. All from Colin. I put the phone on silent. I'm not ready. Not yet. I kept driving. The screen kept lighting up. I ignored it. I pulled into my driveway 20 minutes later. The house was dark, modest lights off exactly as I'd left it. I parked in the driveway, sat in the car for a moment, looking at the house. 22 years in this house. Paid it off in 15. I got out, unlocked the door, stepped inside. Dark, quiet, empty. I hung up my coat, didn't turn on the TV. No countdown shows, no celebrations. I just sat in the living room in the dark. I could hear my neighbors next door, laughter music, the sounds of a party. My house silent. I made tea. It was a habit, something calming. I sat by the window with the mug in my hands. My phone was still buzzing on the table. Finally, I looked at it. 17 missed calls, 12 text messages, all from Colin, one from Pamela. I scrolled through Colin's messages. Dad, please pick up. Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't know, I swear I didn't know. Please call me back. I'm such an idiot. Please don't hate me. Dad, please? I read Pamela's message. Marshall, you were right about everything. I'm sorry we didn't speak up sooner. Roland is not the man we thought he was. Pamela, I didn't respond to anyone. I set the phone face down, looked out the window at the street. 11:58 p.m., almost midnight. The neighbors were outside now, champagne glasses in hand, waiting for the countdown. I was alone at the window with my tea. I heard them counting down. 10, 9, 8. Fireworks in the distance. A happy new year. I lifted my tea slightly toward the empty room. Happy New Year to me. The phone rang again, Colin. I stared at it for 5 rings. Finally picked up. Didn't say anything. Colin's voice came through broken. Dad, please. I'm sorry. I didn't know any of it. Why didn't you tell me? My voice was quiet. Would you have listened, or would you have found another reason to think Roland was better than me? It's not like that I didn't. Colin, you stood in a house I paid for and asked me what I'd built, in front of strangers. Colin was crying harder now. I know. I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say. I need time. I need time. I hung up. 12:14 a.m. The new year had already started. I sat in the dark. The phone buzzed again, Whitney this time. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to the message. Uncle Marshall, it's Whitney. I'm really sorry. Colin just told me you paid for our house. I had no idea. My dad should have told us. I'm so ashamed. Is there any way we can talk? Please. I deleted the voicemail. I won the argument, I thought. I proved I'm not a failure. I looked around the empty house. But I lost my son years ago. Tonight just made it official. The phone rang again. Whitney calling back. I answered. Uncle Marshall, will you come back? Talk to Colin. I paused. I'll think about it. Please, he's completely falling apart. I'll think about it. I hung up. But as I sat there at 12:47 a.m., the first hour of the new year already behind me, I wasn't sure there was anything left to say. Colin showed up at my door 3 days later. It was January 3rd, late afternoon. The doorbell rang. I knew who it was. Colin had texted that morning. I'm coming over. Please don't turn me away. I opened the door. He looked terrible. Unshaven eyes, red and swollen, clearly hadn't slept much. He was still wearing his wedding ring, but his left hand was shaking slightly. Can I come in? I hesitated, then stepped aside. Colin walked into the small house he hadn't visited in months. He looked around now, seeing it with different eyes. The modest furniture, clean, organized, peaceful. You always kept everything so neat, Colin said quietly. Coffee, I asked. He nodded. We sat at the same kitchen table from Colin's childhood, 2 mugs of coffee between us. Silence for a moment. I don't know where to start, Colin said. Start with why. Colin struggled with the words. Roland. His life looked like what I thought success was supposed to be. I listened, didn't interrupt. Big house, nice cars. People respected him, important meetings. A pause. When I met Whitney's family, I felt small. My marketing job, our modest wedding budget, and the fact that I had to ask my dad for help with the house. My voice was quiet, and I made you feel smaller. Colin's tears started. No, you reminded me of where I came from, and I felt ashamed. Roland made me feel like I could be part of that world, like I was building something impressive. I kept listening. Every time I visited you, I saw the old house, the old car, the simple life. And it reminded me that I wasn't born into wealth, that I'd had to ask for help. Another pause. You didn't make me feel small, Dad. I felt small because I was comparing myself to people with money. And instead of being grateful for what you gave me, His voice broke. I pretended you gave me nothing. You treated me like I was invisible. Colin was sobbing now. I know. For 3 years. While you'd given me $80,000. While you raised me alone after Mom died. While you worked your whole life and somehow built millions. And I treated you like you were nothing. You treated me like I was a failure. I'm so sorry, Dad. I have no excuse. I was selfish and shallow, and I destroyed our relationship over appearances. What about Roland? Colin wiped his eyes. Whitney confronted him that night. He admitted he'd seen the wire transfer records when we bought the house. And he said he didn't think it was his place to say anything. But Whitney thinks. He paused. She thinks he liked being the only successful father. He liked that I admired him. She's right. We're taking space from her parents. Whitney's furious with him. That's between you and Whitney. Did you know Roland's business is struggling? I nodded. I suspected. How 35 years in business teaches you to recognize the signs, leasing instead of owning. Always talking about deals, but never about profits. Image over substance. I was so blind. Colin, I love you, but I'm not going back to being disrespected. I understand. I don't deserve. If we rebuild this, it has to be different. You have to see me, not my bank account, not my lifestyle compared to someone else's. Me. I want that. I want to know you again. Really know you. It's going to take time. I'll wait as long as it takes. A pause, sips of coffee. Can I ask, why didn't you ever tell me about the money? Because I wanted you to build your own self-respect, to feel like you earned your accomplishments. Another pause. I just didn't expect you to build it by standing on top of me. Colin looked down. I'm sorry. I know. Can we start over? I thought about it. No. Colin's face fell. We can't start over. The last 3 years happened. A pause. But we can start moving forward. Colin's eyes showed a small glimmer of hope. I want that. Not a hug, but a meaningful eye contact. Small steps, I said. Small steps, Colin echoed. He left an hour later. I watched him drive away in the car I'd helped him afford. I didn't know if we'd be okay. But for the first time in 3 years, I felt like my son actually saw me. 6 months passed before Colin and I had what I'd call a real relationship again. At first, he visited once a week. We'd start with coffee on the porch, 30 polite minutes, careful conversation. Gradually, the visits grew longer. Month 2. Colin asked about my engineering career and listened. Month 3 brought the tell me about mom conversation. He asked questions he'd never asked about Ellen. Month 4. Colin asked to see the rental properties. At the second one, he said, You really built all of this? I answered, one decision at a time. Over 35 years. Month 5 meant quiet dinners at Colin's house, just the 3 of us. Roland and Pamela weren't invited. Whitney was warmer, quietly apologetic. Last week, Colin asked Dad, Can you teach me about investing? I want to understand how you think. I felt the shift. Through Colin, I learned Roland's business had collapsed. Over-leveraged properties were foreclosed. The mansion was sold. They moved into a modest house. The Mercedes went back, replaced by a used Camry. Whitney felt betrayed. Pamela felt relieved. Colin mentioned driving past their new place. I asked how he felt. Sad, he said. I admired him for things that weren't real. I said Roland confused having things with being secure. Like I did, Colin said. Yes. My life looked the same. I lived in my paid-off house and drove my 2008 Honda. It ran perfectly. I volunteered teaching financial literacy. My portfolio kept growing steadily, quietly, without drama or attention from anyone else. One afternoon, Colin asked to see my investment statements. I showed him everything. All this time, he said quietly, I told him I'd been fine. He asked why I still drove that Honda. Because it works, I said. That's when he understood. Wealth wasn't about showing off. It was about owning. He apologized. I said I was glad he saw me now. Real wealth isn't making people notice what you have. It's having what you need without attention. I didn't reveal my portfolio to win an argument. I did it because my son needed to learn that respect isn't earned through appearances. Parents can't give children respect. They must choose it. And if you realize late, it's never too late to see clearly. The past doesn't change, but the road ahead is yours. Last week, Colin and Whitney came for dinner. They said they were talking about starting a family and asked if I would teach their children about money and character. I said I'd be honored. They wanted their children to know their grandfather. It was the first real hug in over 3 years. Colin whispered, Thank you for not giving up on me. I told him I never had. I had only stepped back. That New Year's Eve, my son asked what I'd built. Beyond money, I'd built the ability to walk away from people who didn't see my worth, even my own son. By walking away, I gave him space to see me. That is real wealth, not 1.8 million, but the peace of knowing your value and the wisdom to know when to walk away and when to welcome someone back. It is freedom earned slowly, patiently, and without resentment or regret. Peace finally replaced pride, fear, and old misunderstandings between us. Looking back at my true story, I see a father who almost lost his son to the illusion of success. I won the argument that New Year's Eve, but I nearly lost what mattered most. If you're living my story right now, whether you're the parent being overlooked or the child chasing someone else's approval, don't wait as long as we did. Here's what I learned, and I pray you'll hear this. First, God gave us eyes to see, but pride can blind us. I spent 3 years invisible to my son because he was blinded by what looked successful. It took God's grace for him to finally see clearly. Second, real wealth isn't measured in mansions or luxury cars. It's measured in peace and integrity, in knowing your worth doesn't depend on anyone's approval. These grandpa stories I now share with others. They're not about the money, they're about the man God called me to be, through 35 years of quiet faithfulness. Third, forgiveness takes time, but it's possible. God teaches us that walking away isn't abandonment. Sometimes it's the most loving thing you can do. And welcoming someone back, that's grace. Don't be like Colin was chasing appearances while ignoring the people who truly love you. And don't be like Roland building an empire on debt and image instead of substance and truth. These grandpa stories matter because they're true stories of real people learning hard lessons. I share mine so you don't have to learn them the hard way. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt invisible to someone you love? Have you had to set boundaries with family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you know someone who needs to hear this true story, please share this video with them. Subscribe to the channel for more grandpa stories about real life, real struggle, and real redemption. Thank you for walking this journey with me. God bless you.